absolutely. I get the great honor of introducing Ryan Smith, the Director of University and Assessment at Illinois State University. With a background in art and research methodologies, Ryan is passionate about using data storytelling to influence meaningful change and innovation in higher education. Ryan's goals are to leverage his expertise in creating compelling narratives from complex data, helping institutions understand and act on assessments findings to enhance student success and institutional effectiveness. And today he's going to be talking to us about from data to decisions, leveraging storytelling to inspire change in higher education. The summary of his talk is the amount of data institutions have far exceeds their capacity to use it. Data storytelling is a process for transforming complex findings into clear, actionable insights. This presentation will highlight the potential of exploratory and explanatory visualizations. I'm pretty sure I just mispronounced that, Ryan, so correct me. For storytelling, share case studies, and offer practical tips for mastering data storing and techniques. Glad to have you here today, Ryan.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Smith. Wow, that was an excellent presentation. And I have to say, before, when I was working on this, I felt I was missing so much because my presentation is about my journey. It's in the context of work, so there are some things that can be applied at your work. But Daphne and Glenn just covered it to a T, and so I feel a lot better. So I hope my presentation complements what they did. And I have about 3 pages of notes from their presentation as well. And so thank you for that. And then as an aside, I'm kind of the opposite. Glenn went from math to creative writing. I went from art history and a background of arts to quantitative training in grad school. So again, that seems to be a very common pathway towards assessment, and I think it's a pretty good background. So I'm going to talk about data and decisions. So when you think about the conversation today and you reflect and you take notes, think about data storytelling, but also thinking about your story, because I think sometimes if we come from social science kind of backgrounds, in our training, we're taught that we are separate from the research, right? And I think that really prohibits this idea of data storytelling. When I studied quantitative methods in grad school, I remember looking at the SPSS, it looks like an Excel file, and moving the cells around. And one message I got, well, it's positivistic, it's objective. And I thought, well, I'm moving the cells around. I have a lot of influence over the story. And so when you think about your story, when you think about data storytelling, think about yourself as part of the story. I think this quote to me describes the skill of data storytelling very well. It's seeing something that doesn't exist already. It's taking a giant data set, it's taking a problem, it's taking whatever it is and then making it into a decision and making it into a story. So it's about seeing beyond the data. It's about knowing that just because something is complex is big, and big doesn't mean it's good. Sometimes I'll share a little graph or story, and the reaction sometimes I get, there's got to be more to that. This can't be the whole story. Well, that's part of the storytelling process, right? You can't possibly tell the whole story. It's also about presenting data differently than we're used to. And so again, sometimes we think complexity is good. We think p-values are good. But in data storytelling, you have to, if you want to make it useful, you have to make it easier to understand and reduce that complexity. Okay? So I have a little story I'm going to start with. We were working several years ago with our art program, and they had to come up with an assessment plan. This is just a draft from AI that was made up, but it looks something like this, and it immediately induced anxiety in them. They did not like it because it was too linear. There were lots of grids, and so you can imagine the outcomes of that. If you have your program learning outcomes, they would get a chart like this. This does not tell a story. Maybe the data is good, maybe it's valid. But the problem, I think, this speaks to the problem in higher ed, is that the amount of data we have far exceeds our capacity to use it. We have way too much data overload, and we think people can multitask. They can't. That myth has already been busted. But we do know humans are much better at focus and making sense of patterns, and that they're much better at receiving stories and telling these narratives. I think another problem is that non-technical audiences struggle with using data. And so again, like my example of the art program, even though they're smart people and they know what they're doing, they struggle with using, that's not their training, it's not their background. And what I've discovered in my experience is that even if someone has a PhD in chemistry or statistics, they may even struggle with using data, because when they think of data, they think of like programming, or the scene in the Matrix where all the data kind of flows down. When they think of data, that's what comes into their mind. And so don't assume that just because someone has a PhD in a technical field that they can understand data storytelling. I think there's some other problems that data storytelling can solve. It can break down silos. It can also make sure that important trends aren't buried. So before this presentation and I've started my data storytelling 4 or 5 years ago. I thought about what skills I bring, and I encourage you to do that as well. I think the first thing I bring is empathy. I try to think or remind myself that we're dealing with people when we do assessment. And I think if we start from that kind of framework, do that right out of the gate, that will really help us with data storytelling. I think being patient is a skill because when you start engaging in data storytelling, you're going to go through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drafts. And so if you're working in Power BI or Tableau, you're going to have about 10 different sandboxes and files, and you're going to delete and restart. So patience is definitely something important. But there's some things I don't have. I've never had a computer class. I have some programming skills. I'm not a math person. I've never had math beyond algebra 2. I don't know what calculus or trig are. I think I use them in statistics, but I'm not 100% certain. And so I definitely I have some skills I think I bring, but others that maybe in a traditional kind of data storytelling environment I don't have. So this is a picture of my workstation at home. To give you an idea in terms of how I tell stories, on the right is my laptop, that's my work computer, and on the left is YouTube. I constantly have YouTube or LinkedIn Learning or some kind of professional development site or ChatGPT, something, because I'm going to constantly go back and look for other ideas and engage in professional development. And so, and I also have Mr. Rogers there under my other screen for words of encouragement. You tap on him and he'll say something positive. But my point is that data storytelling is a continual process. Personally, it's a journey. It never ends. And I think that's good. If we all like learning, we all like data, we all like data storytelling, we like applying what we learned. And so I think it's good to take that kind of approach, of that dual screen approach. Okay, so I want to give you a definition of data storytelling. It's creating a compelling narrative based on evidence and inspire action. And I want to focus on two things, evidence and action. Because when you engage in data storytelling, the fear is that you're telling a story that the data is going, and that your story is going to be biased or not represent what is going on. And so it's important that you make sure that you attend to the methodology behind it. But we're all experts, right? We're assessment people. We've been trained. They're paying us to do a job. Actually, what I found is that before I did data storytelling, I would share giant data sets. I get so many questions about it. What's the response rate? What was your process? When I engage in data storytelling, I never get those questions anymore. And I think that's about trust. And so people know us, and I'm talking about us as collective, they know that we're experts, they know what we're doing. So it's important to be confident and tell that story. And of course, to be genuine too. If there are limitations to the data, you want to be open about that. The other thing is to inspire action. If you're not using assessment, why are you doing it? I push back on leaders all the time. I tell programs, if you're not using it, you're wasting your time, you're wasting students' time, you're wasting my time. Utility is the reason we do assessment. That's why we do it. And accountability, there's that other aspect to it too. And so one of the goals of storytelling is you want to incite action in the users. There's 3 elements of data storytelling that you want to pay attention to: the data, the visualization, and the narrative. So this is a typical data set. If you get it from Qualtrics, you can see it's messy. There's 3 column header, or sorry, 3 row headers. You'll go through and clean it. Before you do, you put it into Tableau or Power BI or Excel. Make sure you clean it, make sure it looks good. They still won't look this good. This is a made up data file. But generally, you want it to look as clean as you can. And so the next step is visualization. And there are 3 steps in this. There's perception. So think about your user, your audience. When they look at a visualization or retell a story, they're going to think, what do I see? What does it mean? And then what does it mean to me? Because you may think, and your leaders at your institution may think that there's wide agreement in terms of what the data means. There may be agreement on values of your institution, but everyone is just going to disagree in terms of what the data means. And that's where you get to decision making by judgment. Okay, the obvious decision isn't always obvious. So I have an example here. I want you to look at this and kind of think for a second in terms of, what do you see? I'm going to give you 5 seconds because it's an immediate reaction. And now I want you to think about, what does a visualization mean? Okay. And now spend about 5 seconds thinking what it means to you. So what I see when I normally look at this, I look at the map. I'm a map person. And then I look up to the chart briefly, and then I look at the title. And so what is becoming obvious to me as I interpret this is that different regions of the world have different days for holidays, right? And that if we look in the East, they tend to take more vacation days or offer more vacation days than the US and the West. And then I think, what does this mean to me? And I think I got to move out of the US because they get a lot of vacation time. And so to me personally, that's what this figure means to me. It also means that in the US, I think we work too hard. Our culture doesn't value personal time enough. And so all those things. And then I think about my own life, boy, I need to take more vacation time. Life is short. And so I go through all that emotional thinking process when I look at this, perceiving, interpreting, comprehending. So it's important when you design a visualization or tell a story, think about what your user is going to go through. The final step is the narrative, and watch any movie, read any book, and you are going to see this same format. They churn them out of Hollywood all the time. They're going to say there's the setting, the setup. They're going to introduce the characters. There's going to be some conflict or problem, and then there's a resolution. The problem is resolved at the end. So I want to show you an example of this. This is a chart showing first year student satisfaction, choice, college emphasis on well-being, and it's at a Midwest university. So the setting here is the Midwest University, right? The characters are first year students. The conflict here, so as I see the conflict, is that all these things are decreasing over time. Satisfaction, emphasis on well-being, and college choice. Now, if we weren't employing data storytelling in this, one may look at one line at a time and think, well, satisfaction, that's a student affairs problem. Well-being, well, that's a campus rec problem. College choice, that's an admissions problem. But when you do storytelling, you combine all this together in one narrative. So the resolution may be, maybe we need to share this data with the right folks. Maybe we need to see if it matches with retention. Maybe well-being isn't just the locus of control for campus rec and our counseling and our well-being offices. Maybe well-being occurs in the classroom. I was struck, this is a survey I pulled the data from, and there was a comment from a student who said, I wish there was more interaction in the classroom so I could make friends. And that chart, that one comment complimented this chart to a T to me because it told me that when students think of well-being, they don't think of just counseling and well-being offices, although those are important. They think of the college experience as a whole, also what goes on in the classroom. Okay, so data storing in a nutshell, taking this, you're going to turn into this. Remember I said creativity, you're seeing what doesn't exist yet. So as a data storyteller, you're seeing this, you're turning into visualization, not always though, but usually, and you're turning it into action steps. And then you're using the visualization to incite action. Now, we talked earlier about when I read some of the comments, a lot of individuals said, you know, we're kind of tied to the system. Our administration is all about numbers. I don't think we understand the power that we have. Glenn used the term responsibility. I would say with that comes responsible power as well as assessment individuals. Again, like I said before, you're paid to do a job. I would push back on any kind of system that says we only need numbers, we can't tell stories. We have a lot of power to change that. I have an example. We used to do annual reporting from programs, and we would ask for their data. Well, no one ever used that. No one ever looked at it. The programs didn't like it. So we changed it. So now our annual report just has 3 questions. How's the process going? How did you use results? How are students doing? And they're just stories. They're just 3 boxes on a form. You can change the form, by the way. We're not stuck to the form. We have the power to change the form. And so I think a lot of us may be surprised when our leaders say something that when we push back, that usually they'll be agreeable. Okay? Again, like I said before, they're paying us to do a job. They hired us for a reason because we have an expertise, and it's part of our role to kind of push back on that. And if they push back, I would push back on the pushback. And so just continue moving forward. So I want to talk about 2 kinds of visualizations. exploratory. So when you think about that, that's reader driven, right? And typically that's a giant dashboard that you normally see. And then there's explanatory. That's where the author drives the story. Typically that's a small visualization. And I have two examples to show you. So this is a sense of belonging dashboard. It's from Nessie. So you know that it's exploratory because the title describes the data. It does not describe the story. It just says Nessie 2020 sense of belonging, and that's it. You can also see it's dependent on you. They're not pushing a story. You have to determine what the story is. So they do that through a lot of interactivity and filters. So maybe a user is interested in first generation students. They will go through and create the story on their own. So here's an example of explanatory, which is author driven. This is where the author has a story and they push it on the reader. And you can tell that it's explanatory because the title describes the story, not necessarily the data. So the story here is that women only comprise 28% of Congress compared to 50% of the population. There's a low level of interactivity. There's one filter. You can toggle between Congress and US population. The design, it uses colors to reinforce the story. The shape is the same as the shape of Congress. So this is an excellent example of an explanatory visualization where the author is pushing a story on the user, as opposed to the other one, the reader discovers the story on their own. Okay? So when you tell a story, the first thing you're going to want to ask yourself is, what problem are you trying to solve? I think in higher ed, we don't do this in assessment, but I think in higher ed, we jump right into initiatives and we collect data without carefully thinking about what problem we're trying to solve. Stephanie Evergreen, I've learned a lot from her in terms of data visualization, storytelling, recommends that anytime you do a story, ask yourself, what is the point? And if you can't answer that, don't do it. Again, you're wasting your time focusing on other things, and move on. The second thing you want to do is know your audience. So this is advice from Ann Emery, also a data visualization storytelling guru. So what she says is prioritize the top three and don't make them, the audience is the faculty or the community. Be really specific in terms of who your audience is. And then technical or non-technical, again, I would suggest don't assume that individuals with PhDs in advanced fields are technical, because they may not be. You really have to listen to them and establish trust to see what their storytelling data needs are. The third step, you want to define the purpose of the viz. Is it to discover? Maybe you want to do an exploratory, a big dashboard. Is it to inform? You're the author, you tell the story, or maybe it's to educate. So maybe you do a mix of both, but it's important to define the purpose. Then finally, call to action. That's the hard part. This is a template you can, that one can kind of use to kind of come up with a call to action. So to me, the two most important steps are the first and the fourth. And in fact, I would probably do the call to action right after the purpose. We tend to wait that till the end and we'll deal with it then. But if you're doing negotiate how the data is going to be used or how the assessment is going to be used in the beginning, it won't be used, right? Because people get busy, they get tired, they move on to other things. Okay, so I'm going to show you some cases that I have, and I'm going to walk you through these steps. So this is a chart on first year satisfaction rates. It's okay, but you can see a major problem is when the eye has to go up and down. So you have to go from poor to look down. So I would ditch the legend and just use series labels, put them right next to. That way it's easier to do and you don't have to go back and forth. You could also color those so that they're consistent with the lines, and that makes it a lot easier to use. So ditch the legends if you can. The other story here I see is that I don't care about the poor, it's too small. Why is it there? It's just cluttering up the chart. Take it out. No one cares about it. It's not important. The story here to me is the fair part, and the good, it's the indifference, the story that I see in this, whereas the excellence has gone down. So what I did in this was I combined good and excellent and fair. And then as a final kind of thing, I changed the title just to describe the data to say the percent of first year students who have a fair college experience has more than doubled. That's the story in this graph. So you can see it has some little visual kind of tricks you can do, and then making a descriptive title. And this way I think it does a much better job of telling a story in terms of what's going on than this first one, which is just a basic chart and is somewhat confusing and not engaging. Okay. Here's one where we did on retention. And what we found is that students who leave, first year students, work as hard on pretty much everything. They study just as much as students who stay as returned. They spend more time working. They're just as involved in activities. But the issue is that they run out of time. So what this story is that non-returners study and work just as hard as returners, but they have a lot more non-college work, family, dependent care, all kinds of demands on their time. And so they just run out of time and exhaust themselves. When I was in college, there was that dropout, the lazy kind of dropout myth. I didn't work hard enough. But what this story tells us is that no, that's not true at all. Students who leave college and don't come back, they just run out of time and they exhaust themselves. Okay. Here's a belonging scale by race ethnicity. On this title, it's just descriptive. It's fine. It tells the story that white students express the highest levels of belonging, but you could change it, right? Again, like I said, we have power to do this. So we can make a call to action right in the title. Disparities in belonging by race ethnicity point to needed transformations in how we approach well-being, classroom culture, and representation. Right? You're paid to analyze this data. You can do this. And so this title is a little bit more action-oriented than this one. Okay. Another one, we're seeing dialogue with people from different political perspectives decreasing over the years. We could add another line to this. This points to the need for more deliberate dialogue program and teaching students how to engage with others. I titled this one C's Get Degrees. They do. And so I track graduates after they leave my institution for about 20 years. And what I find is around year 7, the C students have the highest earnings. And I think that's true among most institutions. And you can see those are in the yellow, and the blue are the high GPA students. And again, that's true almost any institution that you look at, that the highest earning students are going to be the ones in the 2, 5, low 3s. And so what do you tell students? So what I found in my research is that GPA isn't an outcome, it's a signal of belonging. When students see a 2.5 or even higher, it tells them a signal that they don't belong. So what I tell students is work as hard as you can. If you're in a major like speech pathology and you need to get into grad school, get A's. But if you get a C, it's not the end of the world. So when we look at what classes A students take for the most part, guess what kind of classes they enroll in? They enroll in classes where your likelihood of getting an A is pretty high. Well, in the long term, employers reward individuals with growth mindsets who take risks, who can deal with failure. And so I think that's what's kind of going on in this chart. So what I would tell students is that don't be devastated by a low grade. You're fine. You do belong to college. It's all about messaging. Okay. Isn't it weird? It was weird when I first started doing this because like, can I tell this story? I don't know if I necessarily see it in the data, but I do, right? I mean, I've trained in this. I have an expertise in it. I share with others, get other perspectives. And so it's a different kind of mindset from our academic training to engage in this kind of data storytelling. Sometimes, so you always want to show a difference or something unique. This one I think is unique because it shows there isn't any differences. So I looked at students who are enrolled in hybrid belonging and in-person courses and noticed that the colors are consistent with the colors in the chart. And I looked at scales with self-reported learning gains, belonging, and student-faculty interaction. What I found is that there are no differences, at least with these students and at this institution, in terms of learning gains, belonging, and student-faculty interaction with hybrid learning and in person. So the story here is that maybe we're doing a good job. Maybe we're getting better at delivering different kinds of modalities. Okay. Okay, so I have some tips. I've stressed this the whole presentation. Be confident. No one knows the data better than you. They hired you to do assessment. They hired you to do evaluation. Push back on the system. You can incorporate storytelling. You can incorporate qualitative research, and you can change the form. You're not beholden to the form. It's online. If it's in Qualtrics or whatever, change the form to reflect your new purpose. Let your academic background go. And so Carol Weiss, she was an evaluator in the 60s. She used the analogy of agriculture research. And she said, if a professor is doing ag research in the lab, they want to control the variables, right? The criteria is measurement validity, and the ultimate goal is to publish. And they want to generalize. But we don't necessarily have those advantages in assessment evaluation. We typically work in natural settings. We can't control variables. We have to engage with stakeholders. And quality criteria is not necessarily measurement validity, it's stakeholder validity, it's use, it's fidelity. So it's a different kind of perspective. So I think it's important to attend to method quality and to make sure that you're doing all the right things, and to be open about the limitations. But I also think it's important to understand that valuation research is much different from academic research. Build trust. I think building trust and developing habits in mind goes a long way towards getting individuals to use data. I think pushing them with all the data that's available to them overwhelms them. And a lot of times they don't even trust it. So folks need to know that you're responsible in telling an accurate story. And I would focus more on being genuine than transparent. I think we focus too much on transparency over being genuine. You can be transparent and people still won't believe the data. And so I think in storytelling, you have to spend a lot of time building trust and build an archive for your story. So I archive all my data stories. We have a campus press blog. I wish I could go back 2 years and just change all of them because I just think I've evolved in so much, but it's good to go back and look and see the progress I make and what I learned. And so I recommend archiving what you have just so you have a repository. And then you can pull a story out and adjust it when it's needed. And then I would embrace humble expertise. I use tons of resources. We have the grand challenges in assessment. That's why I'm here. I am a big fan of Stephanie Evergreen and Ann Emery. In fact, whenever I want to find a right chart for the data, I type Stephanie Evergreen. What's the right chart for this kind of data? I Google it, and then her articles and things come up. There's lots of communities of practice. Again, Stephanie Evergreen. There's Power BI, Tableau, LinkedIn, YouTube. So I would definitely embrace humble expertise in this process. So I talked a lot about. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, about myself and my journey with data storytelling. And I hope it complemented Glenn and Daphne's when they talked more about application at the institution level. Oh, wow, I went through that way faster than I should have. I'm sorry. Maybe everyone's grateful for that, but sorry about that.
No, I think that's fine. It gives excellent time for a dialogue between storytelling and how we represent those stories. And I really like the compliment of both of our presenters today because you have that, okay, we've got this great emphasis on the importance of storying, and then you're telling us or showing us some great ways to tell those stories within that data. So I'll open it up. If there are any questions that people have, raise your hand, put it in the chat, or anything that either of our presenters want to add in since we've got some little bit of extra time. If not, I can put you on the spot, Ryan. And I always like to ask the question, what is your most embarrassing data experience? Like, I know I put out some charts in mine and I look back now and go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I was totally misrepresented. I know it's unfair to put you on the spot because everybody hates those questions, but does any come to mind and what we can learn from that?
Yeah, I've done this a few times in my career. I think too, and this is before I knew about data storytelling, I presented a results. It was at a board meeting actually, about almost 20 years ago, and it showed student satisfaction rates by student affairs offices, and one of them was financial aid, and financial aid was low. It's not because of financial aid, but at the time, students just rated that particular office low. I didn't tell the first time they saw it was at the board meeting, and you can imagine how that individual felt. And so I learned a valuable lesson that always, if you're going to present stories, consult the experts. And I had a valuable experience with that. We were presenting stories on sense of belonging by race, ethnicity, similar to the chart I showed earlier. And I reached out to the directors of the disability services, to the director of the multicultural center, to an expert in LGBTQA resource center. That was so valuable to make sure I was using appropriate language, I was presenting the data responsibly. And so I think storytelling takes more time, right? But it's so valuable because individuals engage with it and they feel like they have a stake in it. And so, yeah, I think that's probably maybe the most valuable lesson I've learned in this process.
I love that you highlight that because I think when we get in positions, whether it's a data analyst or whatever it might be, our assumption is, oh, you're the experts and we don't need to consult with somebody, but really acknowledging that, yeah, I might be the expert on perhaps putting the data together, but using the correct verbiage and terminology and contextualizing in a way that's meaningful to my end user is so important. So I really value that you highlight that as the role. David said he's a new IR analyst and that's valuable. And we always like at Coaches want to support those that are new to these roles and acknowledging, hey, this is things that you might not know. Nobody hands you a manual and say, here, this is how you do this the right way, or don't make the same mistakes that I did.
I also like it was a powerful lesson with the art program I was talking about earlier when they wanted to do assessment their own way. And what I learned from that is that assessment's like a phone. Like everyone in my family has iPhones, and when I look at, they all look the same if you put them on a table. But when I look at my kids or my wife's, it's if you open up and look at it, it's weird. Like the apps are organized differently. It just doesn't look right. But so I think of assessment that way, that we can create a framework and maybe a structure individuals can use, but give them tons of latitude in terms of how they design the apps. And so that's what we try to do here at ISU. And so when we tell our program, just all you have to do is learning goals, measures, and how you're using the results. Everything else is up to you, right? You tell the story in terms of a way that works for you. And even if we have, again, if we have a form like an online form, we can change it. But it's flexible enough where they can enter in their own kind of information, and it doesn't always have to be numbers. Kind of like what Glenn was saying, I think.
I love that phone analogy, especially iPhone. You pick it up and immediately, you open it, go, oh, that's not my phone. Just that instant, but the shell is the same. I'm writing that down because I'm 100% going to steal that analogy because it's such a good one.
Thank you.
Let's see, there's a couple of comments in the chat and just throwing it out to everybody. Laurel had a question. How do institutions track student incomes after they graduate or leave? We are being asked to track our CTE career tech education grads, but we don't have a method to do so. And Nicole chimed in the chat, but does anybody else have anything to add about their institutions on tracking on that was an interesting graph, Ryan, because I know it's something that we struggle with. We've got the research from other places, but we definitely struggle with getting that information as well. So open it up to you or anybody else.
I can talk briefly. So I match the data with state labor market records. So a lot of states will be amenable to that. And so you can submit your data. It has to be matched with social security number usually, or maybe EMPL ID. And then they match it. It's very highly secure. And then they send it back to you with those incomes. Yeah, if you don't have social, you might have EMPL ID. But I will say there's two other options. There's the federal government is getting better at matching all this data. So there's a project called the PSEO. And if you go there, most states are participating in it, and you can look at your incomes of students years after they graduate. And I think the day is going to come where you can go as an institution and even track it. And it is by discipline. So that's one thing you look at. We used to do surveys, but I mean, I don't know. We didn't get good response rate. I'm not sure income data is valuable. And the other problem, surveys asking income a year after graduation, that data doesn't mean anything. I call it the living in the parents' basement phenomenon. A lot of people, it takes time to get settled into the labor market. And so if one of your accountability measures is income a year after graduation, that's a horrible accountability measure. It doesn't say anything. And so the best thing is to look at 5, 10, maybe 15 years down the road. But if you don't have social numbers, that's going to be problematic to match. But I would look at what the federal government is doing and what your state labor market agency is doing, and there may be some opportunities there.
Great. Thanks. All right. Any other questions? And Daphne, I don't know if you're still there, if you were open for questions from your fabulous presentation, or if anybody else wants to share how they're using storying and storytelling to explain data at their universities. I know that sometimes it's at SLO talks, we don't get a lot of time to share. So we've got some repeat offenders that are here every week. So we'd love to hear from you guys as well. This is a great time. Let's see, Brian, there's a question for you. What was the web page you referenced for a career employment data?
That is the PSEO, post-secondary education something, I think. It's through, I believe it's through the US Census Bureau, and most states participate in it. Not every state does, and you can filter it by institution, public, private. But if you're in a state that participates, everyone will be there. Okay. And then, also the college scorecard. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. If you go to the college scorecard, they have income data, and I think it's 1 and 5 years out, and that is by program. And so it's not perfect, but if you go to the college, and you can download that data. I mean, it's free data, not by student, obviously, but you can download that data. There's tons of data in it. And so if you're an IR person, it all comes from you except the income data and some other things. But the college scorecard has a lot of that income information. So pretty soon it won't even be on us to collect it because it'll all be available publicly and externally. So it'll save us the hassle of doing it. So I'd recommend those two places, PSEO and the college scorecard.
Perfect, thanks. So we have a general question in the chat from Johnny. I'm interested in learning more about any assessment tools that best contribute to a comprehensive program of assessment. How did you decide which tools to use? Which was your process in determining which was best? Anybody have anything? This is something that we're a medium-sized California community college here where I'm at, and it really is something we're consistently struggling with, whether it's SLO assessment, ILO assessments, or any other type of data assessments. So we've done homegrown, we've done different platforms, we've used Canvas. So I'm really interested in how other people are using technology and different platforms in their assessments, especially if it's a holistic technology that's available. Anybody have anything? Ricky's back. Let's see, Johnny, when you say program, oh, go ahead. I heard somebody unmute.
I'm sorry, it's me.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a question for Ryan. Ryan, on your assessment dashboards, I put it on the chat for the group to see. You had a good PDF sense of belonging information there. Is that something that your institution created, or?
Yeah, so I did those in Power BI. And so we just pulled belonging data from Nessie, and those tools, Power BI and Tableau, I think they're about the same. I work mostly in Power BI. They're very powerful in data storytelling because they do so much of the back end work on the matching. In terms of setting up the queries, it's work on the front end to kind of get everything organized, and you have to be very detail oriented. But once you do that, those tools are capable of telling really good stories. And so over time now, I've just created those stories in Power BI on my own. So we just create those and share those with individuals.
And the next question I had is, you mentioned telling your story. How do you convert that into learning skills and competencies?
In terms of
In terms of actually students knowing the skills and competencies, converting, telling, because you're telling your stories, right? You're doing the assessments, but at the end of the day, the focus is on student learning, right?
Mhm. So I think someone else may have more to this, but I think it was part of the larger measurement and evaluation ecosystem. And so we always collect it. We always have the big dashboard or the big data set where it's there. But again, it's more data that we can ever use. And so, and the tools we have today are so powerful that we can ask so many questions. And so I think we have to look at our institutional program priorities. And then we have to say, what's important to us now? What's important to us this year? And then what stories can we pull from that? And so, I'll give you an example. If there's like 10 learning outcomes, and if we look at it trend wise and over the past 5 years, they've stayed the same and we don't feel they need to improve, you don't need to tell a story, right? In my opinion, stories should focus on what you need to improve, or maybe even a strength. I guess that's okay. But I would be hesitant to create a system where people are inundated under with stories. Even that can be too much. That may be worse than just sharing the data. I don't know. And so it's up to us and leaders to determine what the stories are, what their priorities are. And sometimes things I think can be anecdotes, they're surprises, and so those stories can be told. But you know, again, if you're looking at learning outcomes and there's an area that needs to be improved, then create a story around that and research it more. So what I tell programs are, it used to be programs would try to measure 10 outcomes a year, or whatever. They'd set up these big complex assessment plans. They never got to it. And so it was just too much. So what I tell programs is if it's better to do one outcome a year really well, and it's something you care about than to do 10 that you're just kind of doing for whatever reason. Right? Because over 5 years, if you do one outcome over 5 years, that's 5 outcomes that you really improved. Whereas opposed if you did 50 outcomes over 5 years and you didn't do anything with it, that was a waste of time. Right? You have the data, but you didn't do anything with it. What was the point? I'm a very practical, utility driven. I'm of that school of assessment. And so, and in fact, James Popham, he writes a lot about K through 12 assessment. He calls it unethical to collect data and not use it, in his opinion. And I tend to kind of agree with that. I mean, again, that's time and resources that could be spent on learning, helping students access. And so, but if we can if we can focus in on priorities and focus in on improvement, I think that's a better kind of strategy. To me, that's my philosophy. And lots of individuals may disagree, which is fine. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Ryan. Hey, great presentation. Would you please elaborate just a little bit about the last comment that you just said, that some people think it's unethical to collect data and not use it?
James Popham says that. If you read his work, he writes a lot about K through 12 assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, he's of the opinion, and if you think we have a lot of assessment.
Right. So let me just say that your comments are kind of like opening here floodgates here in my mind. When you think of faculty, and I again sympathize. I believe it's Laurel who's writing quite a bit about faculty versus them versus the administrators, right? Faculty versus the database. We had speakers and attendees here expressing the frustration around the fact that faculty are there to teach. They are here to provide instructional support for the institution and deliver the content, and that's what they do. And now with Zoom and Canvas, we are becoming technology experts. Now there is the data. And when it comes to data, that is, oh gosh, I mean, that's just a never-ending topic. And I think that one of the fears that you just mentioned is the fact that student learning outcomes assessment generates mountains of that. And that's probably just, naturally causing a pushback around faculty saying, okay, wait a minute here, just a minute. Why do I have to do it, 2, 3, 4 times a semester if I can do it 3 times every 3 years or something like this, right? I mean, why do I need all this data? Students are getting graded and they are being pushed for the program as accreditors and everybody else is expecting. We are doing well. So why do I have to bother with this? And I think that's part of it, that again, if we have let's say 5 student learning outcomes per course, it's almost impossible to imagine, okay, the amount of data that assessment is going to generate. However, what we are completely forgetting in the discussion is the fact that students are the ones who need to know how well they are performing on given student learning outcomes, right? And if we don't provide that information to them, then what kind of a service are we really providing to anyone with data that, again, as many people have already expressed in the chat here, is put somewhere in the database or on the shelf somewhere. It's for accreditation purposes. Nobody ever looks at it. We don't interact with it. It's a demand. It's not anything that's of any good. So I think that's where we are coming from. That we really don't have a good system. We talked about best versus effective practices that would lead to informed decision making based on student learning, rather than what it is that people think that the data should be telling us. So this just would be my overall comment. So if you could please respond to this, I would certainly appreciate this. If you have any thoughts on
I
that.
think Daphne does.
Oh, Daphne is there. Oh, sorry. Daphne, go ahead.
I do, and I love the conversation. So full transparency, I am faculty. I'm still faculty, even though I function primarily as an administrator, and I've been doing it since 2010. I will say this: when you know information that can result in more effective student learning and you don't do anything with it, I have this saying where I say, shame on us.
That's right.
Right? If you know and you don't do to improve, shame on us. And so it kind of goes back to the point around having a mountain of data and doing nothing with it. It is not a good thing. It's not effective because it doesn't result in student improvement in terms of their learning. So I love the point that Ryan made, as opposed to maybe doing 5 outcomes, focus on 1 and doing it really well. And then if you do have a staggered approach, then with time you will have hit all of them, and you probably would have done each one a lot better than trying to do too much at one time. I also just wanted to point out a lot of our programs are accredited. And as you all know, with accreditation, it's not just enough to have the data. You have to show how that data resulted in improvement. How was it used for improvement? And I think for some of us, we kind of get annoyed by that. But if we remember that we're not just there to teach, we're there to be effective in our teaching, then I think maybe we'll have somewhat of an appreciation for actually demonstrating how this is the area I saw that maybe I can focus on a little bit. This is what I did, and this was the outcome of it. Then I looked at it again another year, 2 years later, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to note that a part of teaching is joy and a commitment to making sure that we're effective teachers. And if we kind of see that data can help us to do that, then I think maybe it helps us to be a little bit more willing to look at it. But absolutely never, we should not be collecting data that we have no intent or no ability to use to drive improvement.
Ryan, do you have any thoughts on this? Still,
That was perfectly said.
yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Right. So again, I think it's the issue again, Daphne. This is I couldn't agree more. That's exactly right. It's the student involvement. I think is that's missing from this discussion, right? That we kind of like overload ourselves with the data, and then we go between database and research office and administrator and accreditation. It's just kind of like the stratosphere discussion versus having this. Okay, guys, listen. This is what students learn as a result of our teaching. And I think that's the missing link that we just don't articulate enough. So that's that. And I think that there's just some discussion in the chat here. Yes, Jan Knapp, would you please elaborate on your thought here?
Oh, I was just talking about at our institution, particularly as it relates to faculty.
Right.
they are, they collect data or they publish the data relative to how many students are passing courses.
That's right.
And then, when students are not passing courses, the answer seems to be that we as faculty are not doing a very good job, right? Or if they're dropping out, we're not doing a very good job because we're not retaining our students. Whereas we have no control over when students are doing their work or not doing their work, whether or not they're coming to class or not coming to class, whether or not they've had life issues that have forced them to, to drop out. So the message comes back to us that we are responsible for student success. And
Right.
that makes it extremely difficult to kind of look internally at improving programs, right?
Right. Right.
In that case, basically the message is make it easier for students to stay and to pass your class, reduce the rigor. What other response can we have if that's the only thing by which we're being measured? So yes, we need to look at what data is collected and what data is meaningful in terms of making improvement. And in order to determine that data, we need faculty involvement in discussing, what would be meaningful? How do we see our role? What would we like to know about how we can improve the performance and the outcomes for our students? Some of which will always be out of our control, but much of which is within our control if we're asking the right questions.
Right, and that begs the question, what is really the purpose of education? Are we educating students to persist? Are we educating them to learn, right? What's the
Right.
story here? Because
Absolutely.
you're absolutely right. I just couldn't articulate this any better. If we are held accountable to one standard and something else is given to the students, then I think that's just, a misguided operation.
I thought I heard a really good solution from Daphne and Glenn's, if I may speak for it, the idea of rather than asking, for tons of data or pushing data on faculty and they get the message that they're not doing a good job, maybe have them tell a story to us, and then archive those stories and collect those stories. And then I think that creates it's hard to create a dialogue around data alone, but I think develop these collective stories, we create habits of mind, we create trust. And I think storytelling can facilitate that, in my opinion. And I'm sorry if I spoke for Glenn and Daphne's presentation, but can I see?
Can I say, Ryan, somebody else was ahead of me.
Please.
What's interesting about that, at least in the case of my institution, is that they also have feedback from students about, in terms of satisfaction surveys, et cetera, that say they think that the faculty is doing a great job, that they think they're getting a great education. So that storytelling from the students is telling one story, but the success rates based on the data that's being collected by the administration is telling a very different story, right? And we don't seem to be talking as a college about those two almost competing narratives in order to kind of come up with a better picture of who we are and who we want to become. And I think data plays a role in both of those scenarios, but the data cannot, as I think you guys have really clearly emphasized, the data alone does not tell the story.
Right. Right, absolutely. So the question is again, what kind of data are we getting? What is the data telling us? Yes, very, very well said. This is just a great answer. You're absolutely right. I really like your analogy here, the competing narratives. I think I'm going to steal that thought. This is just very well a statement that very well summarizes our discussion here. That's exactly right. This is the conundrum. That's where we are. We teach and certain things happen, and we don't collect the data about student learning because we are just inundated with information. And at the same time, we are held into a standard of accountability as measured by student persistence, completion, and transfer rates, and so forth. So that may not necessarily have much to do with learning. So those two pieces of information tell us different stories. I could not agree more.
Johnny has a great comment in the chat that I definitely want to highlight. So what I believe I'm hearing is that we should be concerned with the whole student experience. It's not just the learning outcomes that we are concerned with here. The story should be comprehensive in the area of assessment so that we can identify how that's occurring. And I come from child development, so I would argue that you can't even talk about learning without looking at the holistic student experience. Like if those people want to, if certain people at the institution want to focus on student learning, then we can bring in the emphasis on the whole student by really informing that connection of student learning cannot happen without looking at the holistic experience of the student. So that data is just as necessary to collect in order to understand the learning journey of the student. You can't, I mean, it's the whole reason we've got basic needs. Not the whole reason, but one of the primary focus is students can't learn if they're hungry. Students can't learn if they're suffering from mental health that needs to be supported. So I don't want to detach those two conversations because it might not be a functional way that people can think at institutions sometimes, but really drive home that collecting that data on the whole student is what's going to inform how we support their learning journey. But thank you for bringing that up.
Right on.
I have one last, Amanda, I was gonna say, as assessment, probably like a lot of assessment folks, I live in both worlds, the administration and the faculty, and the stories are totally different.
Right.
So you said is what I'll hear from faculty, or yeah, for faculty a lot, and Jan as well, but you miss that in the administrative conversations. Very different stories.
Yeah, and I know that for me, I've really tried to find a way to connect those stories to help make them meaningful, validating, all right, administration has a perspective and they've got different pieces they're accountable to. Faculty have a story. How do we connect those and make them talk to one another? And I do think it ties so well with what we're talking about today in storing the data, because it's a connector. Instead of having just separate graphs, we can look at those stories and how they connect to make it make sense to everybody's perspective they need to look at. Oh, Daphne, please chime in.
Listen, I started typing and then I was like, maybe they'll let me say one more thing. So this is a great opportunity to kind of marry the two. Hear me out for a second. Assessment and then this whole operational efficiency or student success part with the data. One thing that we do is we look at course evaluation feedback. As we know, the students pretty much give you feedback on the course and the instructor, of course, and the delivery. We look at that and we put it up against our DFW report. Because what we've tried to do is we've tried to see, well, are the courses that students are struggling in, what are they saying about it? What kind of feedback are they giving us on it? And then we also put that up against retention and transfer rate, and even graduation rate. So what I'm saying is kind of like what Amanda mentioned and what some of you also have, I think, been considering. Where do the two connect, where we can use student learning and student feedback and this assessment data to kind of help us to get an understanding of how our students are doing as it relates to their success and their outcomes. So it's a great opportunity for your assessment and your data people to really work hand in hand to try to tell that more holistic, that fuller picture of what's happening within our program. So just consider how, the two can actually kind of be used together.
I started to type too, but it's easier to say. I'm trying to think, I would love to be able to do that. We are at a heavy unionized, contract-driven faculty institution. So I'm trying to think creatively, okay, how how could we make that process of the student evaluations and bring in the DFW without contextualizing it in a threatening way, but encouraging faculty to make those organic connections themselves. So I love the thought of connecting those, and I'm trying to think, okay, with the culture that we have with union and contract, how do we do that? Because it is a valid connection. We had the same conversation with student learning outcomes when they first came to be important at California community colleges. It was a huge uproar with faculty because they felt erroneously to me that that my evaluation as a teacher will be evaluated by how my students do on student learning outcomes. And actually, I shouldn't say erroneously, because they should connect. You as a teacher should look at your student learning outcomes and say, how am I doing? Because if my students aren't achieving my outcomes well, then there's something I need to change. So I love that idea of connecting those student feedback with the DFW rate and thinking critically and being sound enough in our teaching to say, I need to do something different. This is right. My students are saying they're struggling. The DFW rates are validating that something's got to change. So thank you for that.